So in this video, I'll be going over some of my expectations for the Giants offense in 2020. So of course they went from Pat Shurmur as the previous play caller now to Jason Garrett. So things will probably be different. They do run some different styles based off what I saw. Now, Jason Garrett hasn't called his own plays in a long time. I think it's been since 2012 or 2013. But I went back and watched some of the Cowboys offense from back then. There was a lot more two tight end sets and stuff like that. A lot more running the ball, of course. And it wasn't really a Pat Shurmur or even Ben McAdoo type. So it might be a different offensive look next year. But then again, we'll see exactly what he does in 2020. But based off the stuff I know and just making some predictions, I just wanted to just basically give some expectations for this offense next year. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and let's get into it. So my first expectation is that Saquon Barkley, if healthy, can see over 300 carries in 2020. So Barkley's carries in his first year was 261 in a full 16 games, which is 16.3 attempts per game. Then last year, of course, missed 3 games and once again averaged 16 attempts per game. So I do think with a new play caller and a guy who likes to run the ball based off his past history, I do believe Saquon could see the ball a lot. And of course, the Giants invested a lot in him. We talk about the second overall pick all the time. And as a reference, in 2014, I know he was not calling the plays at this point, I believe, but Jason Garrett was pretty involved calling a lot more run plays, and their running back at the time, DeMarco Murray, another very talented back. He's not as talented as Saquon in my opinion, but a very talented back, nearly received 400 carries. And if I remember correctly, the Cowboys had a very good year in 2014. They actually went to the playoffs. That was the Des Cauditt game in Green Bay, so they almost went pretty far that year. Unfortunately, things did not break their way, but they had a lot of success running the ball heavily that season. So this is a Jason Garrett quote, and he said it's good to get him the football, talking about DeMarco Murray. He's the kind of guy who can control the tempo of a game and the pace of the game for you. So I think if he goes into 2020 with that same mindset, I think Saquon Barkley is the type of guy that you want to give the ball and that can control the tempo of a game. So if he keeps that same mindset, which maybe he didn't or maybe he won't, because the NFL has definitely changed even in the past 5 years. I mean, we see these air raid offenses, and we see now what the Arizona Cardinals are doing. We see what the Chiefs are doing as well. So there's a lot more passing nowadays than what there was in 2014 even. But that was around the time where things were starting to change. But the Cowboys were a team at that time that stuck to running the ball. It worked out very well for them. And the reasons I do think this could happen is because they have a lot of offensive line improvements. We talk about basically everybody. Andrew Thomas, and then you add Shane Lemieux. I don't even know who's going to play right tackle. I'm assuming it's going to be Solder. I'm assuming it could be, I really don't know. Nick Gates is out there as well. So I do think Solder will get the first crack at it due to the money we're paying him and due to the fact that he's had a longer career and has proved more. Of course, had a rough 2019 season, but he should get the first crack at it. So the offensive line improvements for sure definitely bode well for Saquon Barkley and just running the ball in general. So to be successful in 2020, I've said this before, I do think, I think Anthony said this on the podcast, and it's 100% correct, that the Giants, to be a great team next year, Daniel Jones has to take another big step, and I actually have that included in this video later, but we'll get to that. But I do think another big part of it is running the ball successfully. If the Giants can run the ball successfully, it makes Saquon Barkley's job easier. That was a lot of the argument about drafting Saquon Barkley in 2018, is that it would take pressure off Eli Manning and make his job easier. Well, the same goes for Daniel Jones, and I do think it's a lot easier when you have a mobile quarterback as well. There's a lot of instances where teams with mobile quarterbacks have good running games. You think about the Ravens last year, you think about the Seahawks with Russell Wilson, the guys that ran with Mike Vick, even Warwick Dunn back then. Like, there's a lot of instances of just having a mobile quarterback, and it makes the running back's job easier. Alfred Morris in 2012, I think his rookie year, had like 1,600 yards as like a 7th round rookie. So these things happen. I know Daniel Jones is not as prolific as a runner as RG3, Mike Vick, Lamar Jackson, but he's underrated as a runner. So I do think that can definitely help Saquon next year. And as I always say, if the Giants want to use Saquon to his max potential, they should definitely do it and use him like the Panthers use Christian McCaffrey. I want to see Saquon have 80-something receptions, and I think he had 80-something his first year. No, maybe it was 90, like 90 plus his first year. That was a lot of swing passes from Eli, but it wasn't really running through him. Daniel Jones showed us last year he's not really the dump-off type guy. He definitely likes to scan the field, which I'm a fan of. I'd rather go for the big play than just, dinking and dunking every play. But sometimes you have to check down to the running back, and I do hope that Jason Garrett has some passing plays and even some screen plays designed for Saquon Barkley. So I'm not sure what his numbers will be exactly, but I really do. I really hope they use him to his max potential next year. And the Giants can run the ball with some success. It'll open up the entire offense and just make things so much easier. Expectation number 2 is that for Jason Garrett, flexibility is a focal point. So these are some quotes about him reflecting back on his time in Dallas. Hopefully I read these right. Probably not, because I'm not a good reader. The first one is, there were some years we ran the ball a ton, and that's what was best for the team at the time. Not just for our offense, but that was for the entire football team. And there were other years, based on the personnel and makeup for our team, we threw it more. As a coaching staff, we tried to be flexible with what our team needed. Not just our offensive unit, but for our whole team to give us the best chance to win. So, kind of as Joe Judge said with the whole round pegs and the square hole thing, you kind of want to use your personnel based off its strengths. If you have a team that has 3 amazing wide receivers, like for the current Cowboys, for instance. Let's say the Cowboys didn't have Zeke, or let's even go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's say Jason Garrett was calling plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now. If you're calling plays for them, would you rather run the ball 25 times a game with Ronald Jones and an average offensive line, or let Tom Brady air out the ball 40 to 45 times to these awesome weapons on the outside and even the couple of good tight ends they have? Obviously, you want to throw the ball more in that situation. So you want to play it to your personnel. That's basically what he was saying with that quote. I think it makes a lot of sense. The one pet peeve I have with some NFL coaches, I obviously know they know more than me, but I hate when they just try to come in and be like, yeah, it's my way or the highway, and we're doing what I want to do. Like, you can be a coach that's run heavy. Like, here's an example for you. When Chip Kelly was with the Eagles in whatever year DeMarco Murray was there, speaking of DeMarco Murray, I think that was 2015, actually. They signed Murray, I believe, for a very lanky contract, like 4 or 5 years, a lot of money. And DeMarco Murray is a better north-south runner, but he was trying to run him east and west all the time, and DeMarco Murray had the worst year of his career in Philadelphia. And then, of course, goes on to the Titans, rejuvenates his career, and that's just based on the scheme and system. So you can't force your system and scheme on these players. Like, you have to adjust to what they're good at. So I'm happy to see this, obviously. And the second quote was, when we came to Dallas in 2007, we wanted to put in a system of offense that was something we would have with us, regardless of the players we had, Garrett said. A system that's comprehensive and flexible that catered to the strengths and weaknesses of our team. That early part of that tenure, I was the play caller and 3 other guys were able to do that, but it was our system, it was flexible. So now I see why Joe Judge wanted this guy so much. They think very alike about these things, so now it all makes sense to me. So the things I listed on the bottom was, I think Evan Engram, if he's healthy, of course, could be used all over. I mean, that's a guy that you can be very flexible with. I mean, people have talked about him being a receiver. Some people have some very strong opinions about that. I would try him at tight end. I mean, just keep him there. There's really no point. He's improved as a blocker. I think there's no point in putting him outside. Saquon as a receiver, for sure. I talked about that before. Use him like they use Christian McCaffrey. A lot more 2 tight end sets. You now have 2 pretty good tight ends on this team, assuming they're healthy, and Engram, and then Caden Smith. He continues to do what he did the final quarter of last season, and even Levine Toilolo behind them. And then Saquon and Dion Lewis. Can you use some 22 personnel where 2 running backs are on the field at the same time? I think it's possible. I mean, I'm not too sold on that happening, but we'll see if the Giants use the fullback as well, Elijah Penny. I do think Jason Garrett was doing that in Dallas. So, based on the quote, though, I mean, these guys, him and Joe Judge, just seem to think alike in terms of the way they use their players. And as a fan, I like hearing that stuff. As I said, I just cannot stand the coaches that force their system on the certain players. They will have a flexible scheme that can just fit anybody, basically. If anybody goes down, they're basically saying we'll be able to run this thing. Like, you're not gonna, if you're a team that has, like, it's kind of like what the Ravens did. I always go back to the Ravens, but the Ravens right now have Lamar Jackson as their starting quarterback, who backs him up. I forgot his name already. Robert Griffin III. So I know Robert Griffin III is no Lamar Jackson, but in the instance that Lamar Jackson will go down, you're not going from Lamar Jackson to, let's say a veteran Eli Manning, just for instance, a guy that can't move, and Lamar Jackson will be able to, or not Lamar Jackson, Robert Griffin will be able to run the option and do the same stuff that Lamar Jackson was doing, not at a level that he was doing it at, but he would still be able to run the offense, and hopefully they can still do that. But for the Giants, they have pretty flexible players here. I do think Engram can do anything. I think Saquon can do anything. You do have Golden Tate, who kind of has been resorted to the slot his whole career, but then again, you have Sterling Shepard, who's been on the outside and inside. You have Darius Slayton, who I feel like can do anything. So you have players on this offense, and even a bunch of offensive linemen that can change their positions as well. If you wanted to move Nate Solder to the right side, you could do that. You can play Andrew Thomas at either tackle spot. You can put Shane Lemieux in any of the inside offensive line positions, so that there are flexible pieces on this Giants offense, and I do think they have to be thrilled about that. And I'm sure that went into some of their decision making when they were signing these guys in the offseason as well. And lastly, as I touched on before, number 3, Daniel Jones' development will determine everything. So in 2019, he had over 3,000 yards and 12 starts it was, 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 6.6 yards per attempt, which is average, and then the fumbles, which I believe led the league, or he was up there for sure. So what needs to improve for Daniel Jones, and why is it important for him to take that next step? Well, we see it with teams all the time. I'll go on the year 2 breakouts first. So in 2017, the Eagles, of course, had Carson Wentz, and they went to the Super Bowl that year. Believe they started out 11-2 maybe or something like that. He got hurt late in the season at the Rams, but they had a great season. Of course, went to the Super Bowl even with a backup quarterback. The 2017 Rams, a year 2 breakout for Jared Goff. Of course, he had a very rough rookie season. They get a new coach, a new play caller. Maybe the same will happen for Daniel Jones, even though Daniel Jones was nowhere near as bad as Jared Goff was his rookie year, but you know what I mean. 2019 Ravens, Lamar Jackson, they took that next step. They just have an offense that is just tailored perfectly for Lamar Jackson. They're doing that thing the right way. And of course, 2018 with the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. Some people thought it was questionable to move on from Alex Smith, and obviously it was the right move. It got you to an AFC Championship game and then a Super Bowl win the next year. So they made the right moves there. And as for Daniel Jones, what needs to improve? So the fumbling issue, I think we all can agree on that. The guy fumbled too much last year. You can blame the offensive line for some of them, not all of them. There were some plays where even him himself held the ball too long. There was someone he was even rushing where he lost the ball. So it goes around, every way possible. Like, the offensive line needs to be better, and Daniel Jones needs to be better at holding on to the ball. Smarter decisions with the ball. So yeah, he had some rough interceptions last year. I think back to, there was a game against the Packers. I know it was snowing out that game, but he had a few interceptions. There was a lot of dropped interceptions as well. I think back to his first start against the Buccaneers, where a safety nearly picked him off. It probably should have been like a pick 6. So he had some, moments last year where he threw some passes where you kind of just had a sigh of relief after it. But yeah, he needs to get a little smarter with decision making. I know every quarterback's not going to be perfect, but there were too many of those last year, in my opinion. There was a game against I don't know if it was the Redskins, where he had 2 interceptions, his first home start. But he had some rough games in there for sure. The deep accuracy outside of the hashes specifically, that is something that I feel like not a lot of people are concerned about. I personally have always been concerned about that, which is one of the reasons I was not a big Daniel Jones believer when he was drafted. Now, of course, he's exceeded my expectations, but the arm strength thing has always been an issue for me. Now, his arm is not terrible. It can definitely get by in this league, but to be like, the top upper echelon quarterback in this league, most of those guys have elite arms that can just, pass anywhere outside of the hashes with great accuracy. You think about Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers and prime Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, all those guys, like they were able to just perfectly hit guys in stride downfield. And there were a lot of Daniel Jones throws even in college, even last year, where he was underthrowing guys, and it was pretty ugly. So that was something I have concern with for sure. I do hope I'm wrong. He had some nice throws last year that were deep. Of course, his first start to Darius Slayton was a great play where he kind of moved to his left and then threw like across his body for like a 50-yard pass to Darius Slayton. So that was a good example of it. But there were a lot of times as well where he was just not getting the ball in the right spot, and times where it was underthrown, and times where safeties had time to come over and intercept the pass because it wasn't there in time. So I do personally have concerns about the arm strength and stuff like that. Maybe I'm a fool for it, but I just think compared to the top quarterbacks in this league, I do think he might be a step below them. But you can get by in this league without having an elite arm. That's not what I'm trying to say. Like Alex Smith, Drew Brees the last couple of years, like guys like that, if you can get by on having great accuracy and even having some mobility, which Daniel Jones has. So I'm not saying I'm giving up on the guy, but it is a concern for me. And then definitely throwing in the rain or poor weather conditions. So there was that one game in college, I forget who it was against, maybe like Clemson. It was against a good team, I feel like, but he had a rough game in the rain in that one. Last year against the Packers was a rough one. There was a game against the Eagles, I think, the last game of the year, or I think it was the last game of the year. Had some rough throws in that one. So Daniel Jones has had a history now of not being able to throw too well in bad conditions. So I do think that needs to improve a bit. But if he can improve on that, then that would be fantastic. Of course, the Giants, it would be better to run the ball successfully when the weather's poor. That would be the right thing to do. But you also need your quarterback to make some throws, or else the defense can just load the box against you. So lastly, if he does not break out or even improve, then the running game would have to be dominant, in my opinion. And, when I say that, I'm talking about Saquon Barkley, like winning MVP type dominant, as well as the defense playing at an elite level. So if Daniel Jones does not improve or even take that next step next year, it'll be a rough year once again, based off the schedule and based off how important quarterbacks are in the NFL. So if Daniel Jones doesn't take that next step, you can kind of kiss 2020 and competing goodbye. So I do think he needs to take that next step. It is possible for sure. He just needs to control the turnovers. I think get a little more accurate on some passes, especially the deep ones, and then the turnovers, the deep accuracy, throwing in bad conditions, and even making some poor decisions at times. But outside of that stuff, which I do think most of it is fixable, I'm not sure about the whole arm strength thing. That's probably not fixable. And maybe it is, though, because we've seen, for Tom Brady, for instance, when Tom Brady was, early in his career, he did not have the arm that he had, 5 years later. So there's times where quarterbacks do improve their arm strength for sure. I think even Aaron Rodgers is a guy that, based off what I saw at Cal from him when watching his highlights, his arm got better. So there are times where quarterbacks' arms get better. So I shouldn't say that. I do think all these things here are fixable, so that leaves me optimistic about it. But Daniel Jones, personality-wise, is the perfect quarterback you'd want here. So obviously we hope it works out. So if he can fix those things, then I think we're in a good position. If he struggles again in his sophomore year with turning the ball over and holding on to it, then that might be a recipe for disaster for the Giants' record. But if he does improve, let's look at the bright side. This could be a playoff team, so let's look forward to that. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know in the comments what your big offensive predictions or expectations are for next year. I will look at those, and thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.